Welcome. This is the Public Affairs Forum, sponsored by the First Unitarian Universalist Church of Austin, Texas. My name is Luther Elmore. These forums are presented on most Sundays at noon here in our sanctuary, 4700 Grover. We sponsor these programs to try to further the church's mission, which is to nourish souls, transform lives, and do justice. And we've been conducting these public affairs forums since we first incorporated this church in 1954. And as far as we know, it is the oldest continuously operating public affairs forum in the state of Texas. We'd invite you to join us so that you can ask your own questions of our presenters. Today, we're very happy to have Travis County District Attorney Margaret Moore with us. And to introduce her, we'll have one of our longtime forum members, Bonnie Gardner. Bonnie?
Thank you, Luther, and welcome everybody, and welcome District Attorney Margaret Moore. Let me just tell you a little bit about Margaret. She has been an insider in Central Texas politics for many, many years and has a lifetime of public sector work experience at the state and the county level. She's also only the second woman to serve as Travis County District Attorney. She's going to be talking about what she sees as the primary responsibilities of the DA and what steps she's taking to make the office more efficient and effective. She's going to be talking also about some key issues in the first year of her term, not quite a year. She will update us on how the office is dealing with the Austin Police Department DNA lab issues, developments surrounding immigration policies, the creation of a new civil rights unit to handle officer-involved shootings and other use of force cases. She may also discuss the current state of the Family Violence Unit. Margaret is a fifth-generation Texas from Waco, and she was inspired by her father, who was the DA in McLennan County from 1952 to 1960. She attended UT Law School and first worked in the Texas House of Representatives on various committees in the 70s, and then became Travis County Juvenile Defender in 1976. She later became Travis County Assistant District Attorney from 1977 to 80, and then Travis County Attorney in the early 80s. She also was Assistant Attorney General in the Civil Medicaid Fraud Division for many years, 2005 to 14, and won some key cases prosecuting Medicaid fraud. She was also Precinct 3 County Commissioner, and twice. How she does all this is kind of beyond my imagination. She also served on the Travis County Child Welfare Board, and she was Commissioner on the Board of Emergency Services District 9. The depth and breadth of her public sector legal experience and her knowledge of the inner workings of Travis County are remarkable assets in her new role. So let's give a warm welcome to District Attorney Margaret Moore.
Good morning, and I appreciate the invitation to be here today. You all have been very patient. I was unable to come earlier this year, but I'm happy to be here today and talk to you about the District Attorney's Office. David Falk here just asked me about when I decided to be a lawyer, and I was 8 years old, and Perry Mason was a big thing on TV, and I was in a Campfire Girl, what do we call those, units? And we would play Perry Mason. And it just so happened that at that time, my dad was district attorney, and when we played Perry Mason, they always wanted it to end like a Perry Mason show, where Perry Mason would win. And I knew that the district attorney almost always won. So, it was very frustrating for me. But I would go down to the courthouse, and with Dad, and we would play around, and get into all kinds of mischief that was remarkably well tolerated by the people in the courthouse. And I found myself fascinated with any kind of proceeding that was going on, no matter what it was, whether it was a criminal trial or a civil hearing. I just wanted to watch. And I've often thought about how remarkable it was that I formed the idea that I could be a lawyer, because I didn't see any women lawyers. The only women in the courthouse were court reporters or secretaries, clerks. As it happened, Dad did teach me that they were the most important people in the courthouse, and to get to know them very well, because they could help you every time you made a mistake. At any rate, I was lucky enough to be well supported in my intention, and came down here to Austin, the University of Texas, in 1966 to go to undergraduate school. And in early '67, Dad was elected to the legislature in a special election. So he came down, and he served during most of the time I was in school. So I had a great opportunity to view the inner workings of the legislature, which, can be a life-scarring thing. But I actually loved politics, and I was inspired by the people that I saw serving at that time. There was one woman in the House and one woman in the Senate, Sissy Farenthold, Barbara Jordan. And they were the type of people that that you would aspire to emulate. So, but I wanted to be in a courtroom, and that's how I started working my way out of the legislative environment and into a courtroom. I was very interested in juvenile law because I had worked on some reform bills when I was working as a legislative aide in a later legislative council. So when I got the job as a juvenile public defender, it was right up my alley. And that was a very educational experience. Most of our proceedings, of course, are very non-adversarial out there. You're trying to work out a good solution for a child. But I still wanted to be in the real courtrooms, and when Ronnie Earl got elected DA, I started begging him for a job. I had worked briefly for him as a committee counsel and knew him well, and I was hired there in July of '77. I got to try about everything there is to try, and loved being in the courtroom, conducting investigations, working with the police. So in '79, I was encouraged to run for county attorney. And that was a remarkable term for me. I learned not only about handling misdemeanor cases, which is what your county attorney does, but also we were beginning what is now a very robust civil section in the county attorney's office, because you handle this county civil work as well as the misdemeanor prosecutions. So then that was followed eventually with a couple of tours on the Commissioner's Court as an appointee, where I learned about county government. And that may be one of the most amazing jobs there is to have, because in one day you can go from how to build a jail, working on drainage out in the county on a county road, and then how do we deliver health care to the people who can't afford it that are in the county system. So the range of knowledge that you develop is really astounding. I don't think people really understand how critical these jobs are. And now I'm district attorney, to which I dreamed of becoming for many years, and I'm so grateful every day that I get to do it. When I took office in January, we have about 230 employees, and or a little less than that now, but 92 of them lawyers. The rest we have investigators, secretaries in our courts. We have clerks who keep records. and we have paralegals, and we have victim witness counselors. One of the things that we began doing, I think some of you may have met my first assistant, Mindy Montford, when she came to speak here. She's a remarkably talented young woman, and it's one of the greatest blessings of my life that she agreed to come be my first assistant. She's well acquainted with the courthouse. She, too, had been an assistant district attorney, and she'd also been in the defense. So she brought that perspective, and I think it's an important perspective for any prosecutor's office to have, what it's like on the other side of that courtroom. We began looking at the organization of the office, shortly after the primary, whenever it was that she agreed to come work for me somewhere in May. And ultimately, we identified our leadership team and reorganized the office, at least on paper. We took 13 directorships, reduced it down to 9. We moved some things around to make it make sense managerially. We had to decide who we wanted to extend offers to and to whom we did not, and then find the talent that we wanted. The district attorney's office in Travis County ought to be the best DA's office in Texas, and I will not rest until it is. We have access to extraordinary talent here, and they want to come work for us. So we should be staffed with the very best there is to offer in this community. I did create a family violence unit. When I was campaigning, I saw numbers that indicated that family violence cases or domestic violence cases, they comprise the second highest number of felony charges filed in Travis County in the year 2015 and 16. Well, that was an amazing revelation to me, and it caused me and Mindy to take a hard look at the resources dedicated to those cases. They're very difficult cases. The victims are fragile and almost always uncooperative after they've made the initial report. They have needs for services that, of course, have to be furnished outside the district attorney's office. So we decided that we would take a lawyer per court and dedicate them to the family violence unit. We also took a part-time intake position and made it full-time, and we collaborated with the county attorney's office to begin screening these cases jointly. One of the critical moments in the life of a family violence case is the initial decision to pursue charges, and if you're going to pursue them, should it be a misdemeanor or a felony. That decision was being made at the law enforcement level, with different collaborations going on between them and the county attorney and then the district attorney's office. We weren't really doing it together. And that caused cases to get bouncing around in the system, back and forth between the county attorney and the district attorney. And the longer these cases are pending and the more uncertain of their fate, if you will, the more you lose your victims' cooperation. You can even just lose them altogether. You can't find them by the time you need them. So we're doing a much better job with that. We're very, very proud of the results we're getting with this reorganization. There are 8 district courts that handle felony cases, and these cases, as they're filed, all felonies are randomly then assigned to the district courts as they're filed. And so having one lawyer in each of those courts dedicated to these cases allows them to focus their attention on outreach to the victim. We try to make our outreach within 24 to 48 hours, connecting them with the prosecutor who's going to handle the case and the victim witness counselor who's going to be the person who keeps them apprised of what's happening to their case. And then by devoting these assets, we have managed to reduce the time it was taking to get from filing to indictment from 77 days to 47 days. That's a huge improvement, and we're thrilled with that. We also have tried we tried 6 cases to a jury during the first 6 months of 16, but under our system we had got 10 of those cases tried. We've also taken, these cases used to go to a county court at law number 4, presided over by Judge Mike Denton, and unfortunately that the docket got so overloaded there that the felony case load on the jury docket was up around 90 cases when I took office. Well, he's trying 1 case a month, 1 felony a month. Do the math. Lawyers knew they could just put it on a jury docket and it'd be ages before they got around to it. Well, we have reduced that backlog to 27 cases, and we think we'll have it pretty much cleared by the middle of next year. Funny thing happens when you try cases. A lot of cases then plead because they read the writing on the wall. So we're pleased with the progress we've made. We got around to trying a 2017 case just a couple of weeks ago, and that was a big deal for us because we were also trying a 2011 case at the same time. So we had some stuff to clear up. I did create a civil rights unit. We're now calling it a civil rights division because not only did we move the officer involved cases, use of force cases, into this new civil rights unit, I also moved our conviction integrity review under this same director. And I've made some innovations here I think are going well. I wanted this unit to report directly to me. One of the criticisms that I heard during the campaign about handling officer-involved cases was that, well, you know, you've got prosecutors who work with the police every day, and then you expect them to turn around and fairly prosecute an officer. Well, and there was a strong push or issue around whether we should just use special prosecutors appointed by the court to handle these cases. After studying it for a while, I decided I was not in favor of a special prosecutor in these cases. I felt like that would in fact reduce the accountability to the public. I think an elected official is the appropriate person to account to the community for how cases are handled and for the results of those cases. So I made that decision but to address the issue of impartiality towards the police, decided to use a unit that did not work with the officers in regular cases, but was dedicated only to officer-involved shootings and other use of force cases, and that unit would report directly to me and not up through the chain of command. So we did that, found a remarkable person to head that unit, and he's just done everything I could hope for and more. He studied best practices across the country and even some not even in the country, and we've come up with a plan that we have implemented. And this unit, we have written protocols that will soon be posted on our website. It's taken a number of months to get them all together. We go to the scene of every shooting, of every death case. I go myself when I'm available. I've been to a number of them now. And we observe and monitor the investigation from the beginnings of it. So as soon as the Special Investigation Unit at APD, for instance, gets the call, there's been an officer-involved shooting, they call us. I have beaten them there. We get that call so quickly. And we consult with them during this special unit that handles it for the law enforcement. We consult with them about search warrants, the typical kinds of things you do in an investigation. And then we go to all their briefings. They do a very thorough job. If you were ever to come to the scene at 3 in the morning, you would see 35, 40 people combing for evidence, taking pictures, doing the ballistics, all of that. It's an impressive deployment of all of the specialty units at the police department. Once that's been done, a few days later, they then give a briefing, and we attend that. Then when they have done all of the work that they feel they need to do, and we advise them on that, we say, well, maybe you need to do this, and they're very open to that. Then the case comes to us, we examine it, we decide if we think there is something left to be done, and we have the investigatorial strength to get that done. Then we make a decision. In the past, the practice of the district attorney's office had been to present every single officer involved case to the grand jury. Well, the result of that was I came into office, there were 7 or 8 cases backlogged, some of them more than a year old, that the officer had been under the cloud of not knowing the result of our investigation for all of that time. And I felt like that was not serving us well. It was not helping the community know what these cases were about, and it was not allowing the police department to move forward from an incident. So we are now just about to issue our first declination letter. We looked at practices across the country, and we decided we wanted to pursue this course where when a case comes to us and we feel there is no criminal charge to be pursued against the officer, we will issue a formal declination, and we will put all the results of our investigation out for the public to see. It hasn't worked as quickly as I'd hoped because when we did have the backlog, and then we had a number of cases in the first few months of my term. So we had this backlog to deal with, and then we had all these new cases to deal with. In the meantime, we were also getting use of force cases less than deadly. So we had several of those to work up, and a couple of those did result in 3 of them in prosecution. So the same 2 lawyers are trying to get all of this done, and it's taken us longer than we had hoped. But in the next couple of weeks, we will be starting to issue the declination letters and put the evidence out so people can see how these cases were investigated. I think that's been an important development for us. We also implemented the practice of using a special grand jury only for these cases. And that has worked out extremely well. Under the law, we were able then to do a limited voir dire, which is an examination of the jury panel to see, identify the people least likely to have a bias in these cases that could adequately represent the community as a grand jury on these officer-involved cases. Our first grand jury has met for 6 months now, and their last day is a week from Monday. They've done an extraordinary job. And it gave that group the time to look at the evidence very carefully, hear all the witnesses, watch the videos, listen to, there's a lot of evidence here. And they did return 2 indictments for us on less than lethal cases. The side benefit to that, which I did not foresee, was it made our other grand juries have less of a workload. These are very time-consuming cases. Well, we were able to reduce their hours, and the result of that was we got more people qualifying for grand jury service, and that it gives us a shot at the kind of diversity on our grand juries we'd like to see. So I'm pleased with that. And the conviction integrity unit right now is largely dealing with DNA cases. The DNA issue, we could talk for a long time about just that. But right before I took office, I was pulled into a meeting because of developments regarding the integrity of DNA analyses from the Austin Police Lab. Not getting too far into the weeds, there were irregularities that surfaced in a rape case that indicated that contamination had taken place, and that led to a whole full-blown look at the lab and a report from the Forensic Sciences Commission that as to the deficiencies of the lab practices. That Brian Manley became interim-chief just about a month before I became DA, and he and I were confronted with this right away. But there has been a group of us working almost weekly to identify all the things we needed to do to deal with the situation. And we had to come up with additional resources, or additional labs to which we could send our cases. That wasn't an easy task. We had to figure out what consulting we needed to determine what happened so we could keep it from happening again, and identify any cases that were affected. So my integrity unit is looking at all the cases wherein a DNA test was material to the conviction. And that has been literally thousands of cases. So we've begun sending out what we call Brady notices, which are notices that say, hey, there is a factual development that's taken place that you need to be aware of so that you can decide if you, the defendant, want to ask for a review. Then we have a process in place. When those requests for review come back, they go to a squad of defense lawyers paid for by the county, and then the defense, they call themselves a forensic group. They consult with my conviction integrity unit as to the materiality, and we are in the very, very early stages of seeing how many of these cases will ultimately need to be reviewed. So we had to find resources to retest if that's what we need. It's been a very arduous undertaking, but I think the good news that I can give you as a community is that the level of collaboration and cooperation has been extraordinary in my experience, and I believe that we are well on track to, it's cost us some money. It's cost you a lot of money, but we are on track to get our testing done in a timely fashion, whether it's an investigation, a pending case, or a conviction, and to also identify for the Commissioner's Court and the City Council the best options for structuring a DNA lab in the future, how it should be governed and how it should be paid for. No, that's the big one. We have placed as much emphasis as we possibly could on diversion in appropriate cases. We have specialty courts at the felony level. There's a pretrial diversion through the DA's office, and there's a drug court that's presided over by Judge Kennedy. There's a veterans court. I think she's got it too. And we have a mental health docket. So let me just quickly say what I think are the biggest issues with which we are dealing as a community-wide problem. Whether one of them is definitely those individuals in our community who have some sort of mental health diagnosis or affliction that end up in our criminal justice system. Our sheriff will tell you that 30% of the inmates in her jail have some sort of mental health flag. I inherited a mental health docket. We don't really have a mental health court in Travis County, but we have a docket, and we struggle every day to deal with people who commit felonies but have mental health problems. And many of them are repeat offenders. We see them over and over. They do not fit into a regular probation well. They do not tend to be able to live up to the terms and conditions of a regular probation. However, my tools as a felony prosecutor are limited. And so my feeling is that we as a community need to look at this across the community through interagency, intergovernmental inquiry as to how do we really want to handle these cases, and how and where will we find the resources to address this issue. People don't want us to be jailing someone who, say, is in there as a felon because he's a repeat theft offender. But every time he gets out of jail, he goes out and steals the same sandwich from the same Walmart over and over again, and ends up back in our jail, and we end up trying to figure out something that might get him engaged in mental health services. So this, to me, is a huge challenge. I've raised it with the mayor, I've raised it with the county judge. There is no one in a position of authority who is unaware that this is a big issue for our community. But I'm hopeful that we can put together the kind of leadership that will identify some priorities for us all as members of this community to support. I do think tied to this, or at least intersecting with this substantially, is the highest number of cases filed in the years that I looked at the numbers, and we're still on track to stay that way in 17, is possession of a controlled substance under a gram. These are what we would call low-level drug cases, but they do involve dangerous narcotics, methamphetamine, cocaine, crack, K2. They are dangerous drugs, and this community is ridden with them, and we make 1,600 of those under a gram filed in the last 2 years. I am on track this year to file a total of about 4,000 drug cases. So not just the under a gram, but that's a lot of drug cases, and it is choking our courts and our jail. And we are not dealing with it. We are not changing that behavior. I kept hearing throughout the campaign, why do we jail these people? Why don't we just get them treatment? Unfortunately, what I had to tell you is that I went in there fully prepared to divert them into treatment. But they don't want to treatment. There's a hardcore population that is perfectly willing to sit in our jail for 45, 60, 90 days, and by the time we force that case to resolution, they've done enough jail time, the judge looks at us and says, why don't we just plead this? It's got enough time. So we're doing what we call 1245s, which is a section of the Code of Criminal Procedure that allows us to get a felony conviction, but for time served in a county jail. Out of 1,600 cases, we only sent 200 to the state jail, which is really where they're supposed to go. And I'm looking at my friend, the probation officer there, who does substance abuse. I think she knows exactly what I'm talking about. We simply have not come up with a satisfactory way to force people into treatment, much less successful treatment. So this is a problem, and I view it as one of the biggest areas that I have to work on. I do hope to have a closer communication with the law enforcement about what are our objectives here. And then we're kicking around some other ideas. One of our problems is we can't get our lab tests back in a timely fashion. So a drug case might take 8 to 9 months to get the lab results. Well, that's entirely too long, so we're looking at what can we do to supplement those resources and move our cases better. So I know you want to ask questions, so I guess I'll just stop there and say, does anyone have something there?
I'm Glenn Williams. I wanted to ask your thoughts about what we can do to improve our response to child abuse, child neglect. What have we been doing? I know the child protection team is really well thought of. Other thoughts you have, what ways we might move forward in the future?
We do have a child abuse unit, and we patterned our domestic violence, our family violence unit after the child abuse unit because of the extraordinary way that those cases are handled here in Travis County. I think we're going very well there. The Children's Protection Center is very well supported by this community, and probably the area that I'm least where we're getting killed is on the kinds of cases that actually go to our Child Protective Services group. They are civil attorneys that handle the removals when we have to terminate a parent-child relationship, and we're getting killed there. The Commissioner's Court did give us an additional lawyer in the budget right before I took office, so I think they're trying to address it. But that's to me where we've got to do better. Then of course I don't think I need to tell you all about the issues regarding foster care on a statewide basis. It's clearly something that has to be addressed, and we work with those with them, and we're drowning and they're completely underwater. So
I'm impressed by how much of a big corporation the DA's office is. When you mentioned the DNA testing lab and having its various problems, many corporations and government agencies follow standard quality procedures, ISO 9000 or others, and a lot of them are you write down what you're going to do, you do it, and then you document you've done it. Is that sort of thing done in the DNA labs and the drug testing labs?
yes.
Okay.
Yes, and one of the inquiries that's taking place now is an examination of the quality assurance protocols, so that the lab practices are consistent with the standards. There were several areas where the APD lab was not in compliance with national standards, and those have been addressed. What happened is APD went ahead, and I give Chief Manley a lot of credit here, that he was very extraordinarily courageous, and he stepped up and said, we're not going to hold on to this lab. And that enabled us then to bring in the kind of supervision of the existing facilities. So we brought in, we have an agreement in place. I say we, the city of Austin entered into an agreement with DPS. And so now the personnel in place at the APD facility are DPS trained and supervised, and they are known, they are well regarded as far as their knowledge of protocols and standards. So we are back in business at that facility using DPS personnel paid for by the city of Austin, which was a good solution. It gives us a 5-year window to get our options together for the future. So yes, there are standards and protocols, and that's been our job, is to begin to meet them.
It sounds like you're in the midst of a sea change at the district attorney's office. It's a huge endeavor to make things better, and you're working at it, and we all appreciate that very much, and thank you for caring so much about our community. First quick question is, how do you feel about that sea change? How's it going for you and your team? And the second is, this is a sanctuary church, and we wonder what are your thoughts about the sanctuary community and people who are running for their lives and coming to places like our church and asking for sanctuary?
Okay, that's really two questions. So the sea change has, I think, gone very, very well. I walked into an office that was ready, willing, and able to help new leadership create a DA's office that this community can be proud of. And I also noted that this is a community that desperately wanted to be proud of its DA's office. I think I can tell you today you should be. We did, there are some really amazing lawyers down there who are dedicated to the proposition that we are there to see that justice is done. That is our moral and legal mandate. And that is something we live by. We don't just say the words. And I love these people who are there to get that done. That's what they want to do. But that is also full of the most dedicated support people that are so proud to be working there and come to me and say, thank you. We now feel like it's the kind of office we wanted it to be. We had a spring picnic, and they hadn't had anything as a DA's office for, I think they said 11 years. It's been that long since they'd had a party or something. So I think it's going very well. I'm very proud of the new people we brought in, and I've got a leadership team to die for. On the issue of the immigration problems, I think that Sally, our sheriff, Sally Hernandez, came to office. I was with her on the campaign trail. I watched that race while I was conducting my own. We were at every forum together, and this is a community that wanted the policies that she put in place. And she responded to that with great courage and vision. It's been a very tough year for her. There are some difficulties about the way the state of Texas has decided to try to deal with immigration that I kept thinking, well, surely someone's going to get it, that deporting people is not making us safer. And especially when you use an example of someone who's come back in the country 5 times after being deported, my first concern was, how do I keep people in the criminal justice system that need to be there? Because I would rather try them and put them in our penitentiary if they've committed a violent crime than give them a free trip back home. And I'm not being flippant. I really would rather do that. So, yeah, so when we had were presented, for instance, with a case of sexual assault on a child, and the guy was about to get out on bond, Sally's office caught it, and they made the decision to alert us, and we went up and got his bond raised. So we worked together on that. She sends us a list every single day of everyone in the jail who has a detainer, and we take a look at the bond, and we try to keep them in. I had also approached ICE and said, look, if you pick up someone and you can see that they have an open felony, call us. We will writ them back at our expense to put them to trial on a felony charge. And they're, so these are serious cases, many of them, where they just show up as a bond forfeiture. Well, we're not safer because some guy is now in Mexico and going to easily come back. So we had that. Then there was the issue of victims and witnesses, which, of course, the law enforcement community, I think Chief Manley has been very vocal about this. We need these people to feel safe to come forward and report crime and work with us as we prosecute these crimes. So there's a thing called a U visa that you can get to stay in the country if you've been a victim of a crime, but it takes a while to get it. And we work with the lawyers who are trying to get these for these victims. But I decided, well, we'll give them a letter. I mean, it doesn't seem like much, but at least it's a piece of paper from us with identifying information on it, saying this is a witness or a victim in a crime. We've got a case. Please call us if this person presents this letter to you. we haven't gotten a call yet, but we haven't had that many issued yet. But these are the kinds of things that are, you know, in the very fabric of how we do keep each other safe through the criminal justice system that I felt were very poorly addressed by our policymakers at the state level. But, you know, we're doing what we can. We also have issues coming up about people not showing up, and we do the best we can. But
I don't know how many people in the audience are aware of how the specialty courts have been caught up like a political football of their funding with our sanctuary city stance by our sheriff. So could you give us an update on what the funding for the specialty courts is, if you know that?
Well, as best I know, right now, the county has found a way to continue the funding for the essential ones. This business about grant money is not just in that area, not just specialty courts, but other kinds of programs that are where we gotten really accustomed to having in place. There's for instance, this program that gets drug treatment for parents in our CPS cases, in our juvenile cases. So, you know, things like that where you believe that for the overall good, these are good things to have in place. But as far as I know, the county is finding money to continue the programming that it believes to have been beneficial. So that caused a pretty thorough examination of what are we getting good results from. Yes, ma'am.
I'm interested in knowing,
Excuse me, would you please identify yourself?
my name is Susan Page, and you talked about Child Protective Services. I'm interested in Adult Protective Services, which is state. How do you coordinate, or is there coordination between counties and the state in terms of adults in crisis where they're in danger to others or themselves because of their mental condition, and the way that you go about trying to get services when they're not cooperating?
Yes, we do get reports, and we do handle those cases when they're reported to us. So,
It's not criminal yet, so how is that dealt with?
well, they are looked at to see if there is a criminal case. That's where we get involved, when they want us to determine whether or not criminal charges should be brought. We also, the director I have over all of our special prosecutions is particularly interested in elderly abuse. So we've got some white collar cases, we call them, where an elderly victim has been defrauded in some way. So we get them a couple of different ways.
My name is Fred Higgins, and during this past session of the legislature, as an outside observer, it seems to me that there have been a lot of bad laws attempted to be passed. And I see it as a case where it's hard to be a good cop when you see all the bad stuff happening, but if you have to enforce bad laws, that makes it worse. I wonder how that fits into your position as well.
I just read a really interesting article that talked about, it was supposed to be about plea bargaining, which is a topic, you know, that often comes up at the evils of plea bargaining against the necessity for it. But in it, it talked about one of the problems here is we've over-criminalized a lot of behavior. And I find it so interesting how everyone, at the legislature tends to, I'll stand up and make it illegal to do this, or we'll make it even punishable by an even higher punishment, and that'll solve it. I will tell you this, the District and County Attorneys Association tries to monitor all of the legislation, and one of the remarks that we often make is, how in the hell are we going to excuse me, I know this is being, how are we going to enforce that? You know, how are we going to enforce that? And what happens then is that you're forced in a position of making the kinds of judgments about how you're going to allocate your resources, how you're going to prioritize your enforcement efforts, and how do you match up a community sentiment about how a crime should be punished versus what the legislature says. And that means that we've got to make those adjustments through plea bargains and through prosecutorial decisions. And then, you know, people go, well, you're just selling, you know, the courthouse. But this is how it affects my job, because I've got to work with my prosecutors every day to say, what's the right thing to do in this case? Given all the facts and circumstances around this case and the criminal history of the defendant and the sentiment of the victim, what's the right thing to do? And it is difficult in many instances. Drug cases are a good example of trying to mesh a community that doesn't want to see them jailed with a legal structure that all I've got is increasing punishment, levels of punishment to deter the behavior.
Just a quick question. I was kind of aghast to hear that drug testing takes months and months and months. Is that part of the overall DNA lab testing problem? Is there any way to pull that piece out and figure out some ways to get that done more quickly?
No, the drug testing is done by a different group of forensic analysts. The Austin Police Department has its own drug testing lab, and their cases go there. We can get a pretty quick turnaround for jail cases through the Austin Police Lab. There are some drugs, like the K2s, that just take longer because of the complexity of the chemicals involved. The problem is the non-jail cases take longer because we're putting priority on people who are in jail. And the cases that are handled by the Department of Public Safety, those cases come from our outlying agencies and the Sheriff's Office and DPS. So those cases are the ones that take the longest. And one of the initiatives I'm interested in pursuing and probably will put forward pretty soon is that the county look at funding an analyst in the Austin Police Department so that we can get a faster turnaround. I think that's all going to be accelerated. That kind of discussion is going to be accelerated because the DPS started talking about charging for these tests, where they've before done them for free, and when we got to start analyzing what we're paying versus what we're getting, I think it'll make sense to move to staying closer to home.
Time for a quick follow-up on that issue.
Yeah, I'm not in charge of the time.
Early on in my training as a psychologist, I realized one of the toughest decisions was, is this person on drugs, or do they have a mental illness, and are they psychotic? And that, ideally, if that could be determined more quickly through some drug testing, I'm wondering if that might help in sending people in the right directions in terms of handling their cases.
Well, let me make sure you understand. I'm talking about the analysis of the substance and how long those take. There is a screening process in the jail to try to identify the mental health issue, the drug issue. There's often, and both in place. And so we do operate a very well guarded mental health facility in our jail and a health delivery. It's one of the biggest healthcare deliverers in the county, the jail. So there are screenings that take place to help us get to the bottom of that.
I'm Ken Cohen, and I'm asking about, have we thought about asking the giving pledge, Warren Buffett's source of billionaire money, to help us smooth out some of these hurdles?
I have not heard of that, so I have not looked at it, no. Sorry. We
We
do
have
look
time
at,
for
we do
one-
look at a lot of different foundation sources, but at some point you do have to decide what you want to support as a community.
We have time for one short, last question.
Shirley Weiler, work at Fort Hood and Family Advocacy, Domestic Violence, and I want to thank you for taking it seriously. I guess my question is, what appears to be the success rate of the local batterers intervention programs? I assume you're referring your clients to that.
I think to the extent that we have them, they are successful. I think as always, it's not as available a resource as we need, but yes, I think they do a pretty good job. We tend to see the worst cases. You understand, David Escamilla, our county attorney, is handling the misdemeanors where that's usually a more successful intervention. I'm handling the kinds of cases where we're getting sentences like 45 years, or, so, yeah, it's past that point.
Okay, we have one time for one final last question. Very, very short.
Way to go,
I'm
John.
retired. If I would volunteer for grand jury, what would I be volunteering for?
Well, you can't volunteer for grand jury. The grand juries, there was a change in the law a couple of sessions ago, I believe it was 13, that mandated that all counties summon their grand jury panels as you summons a regular pettit jury panel. So it's random selection through driver's license rolls. And then those panels come up, about 80 of them, people for each of the courts that's calling the grand jury. As soon as they find out that it's grand jury duty, it's going to be there for 3 months. Half of them raise their hands and go, I can't possibly do that. And then at the end, we end up with about 25 that come back. And out of that, then 12 grand jurors and 2 alternates are selected.
District Attorney Moore, thank you for your time and for being with us today. And thank you for your service to us and all the taxpayers and citizens of Travis County. Thank you.
Thank you.